Well, greetings, friends. Here in early 2023, putting out some video studies, learnings, explorations. Thanks for joining us. I did a podcast recently, and it was so good and so interesting. And I kept thinking, "Ooh, there are visuals here, right? You don't want to just hear what we're talking about. You'd actually like to see some of it." So I decided to put that podcast back out in this video form. You may have heard the podcast. My podcast, by the way, is called Maybe I'm Amazed. It's cool. It's fun. Talk to fascinating people. Got a whole archive of these. Roy Williams, basketball coach, Tim Rice, lyricist for Jesus Christ Superstar. Amazing people I've talked to. In this case, I talked to a world-renowned archaeologist who was one of my professors when I was at Duke, and we stayed in touch over the years, Eric Meyers, Dr. Eric Meyers. And I thought you would enjoy, watching him talk. But then as he talks, we can put in some stuff, and you can see some of what he's talking about. I think that'll be absolutely fascinating. So thank you for joining us for this. I hope you enjoy it or are blessed by it in some way. Eric Meyers, how are you this morning?
I'm just fine. I hope you are. Carol sends her warmest greetings.
Love to her. It's a pretty rug you got behind you there.
Yeah, that's from Afghanistan.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
Are you at home?
I'm in my home study, yes.
It is pouring down rain here.
It stopped for a while and it's just restarted. Yeah. Right. We're getting the big storm now.
Yeah. Hey, thank you for doing this. I loved I've published with the same publisher, so they send me emails, and I saw that you had this book, and I thought, man, I got that right away, and it was, you're even cooler than I thought you were.
Cooler? Wow, that's an odd description.
So for our folks, I'll remind them of sort of our past together. I went to div school at Duke, and I saw you and Carol around the school, but didn't know you that well. But then when I started the PhD program, I think you had just become the head of the religion department of graduate studies in 79.
I was director of the graduate studies program for almost 16 years, on and off,
So you were on my dissertation committee. I studied with you, studied with Carol.
Right.
We went to your home. You were that kind of y'all were great professors. I remember going to your home, and it was Sukkot.
Oh,
and as a sheltered white Protestant kid from the South, I had never heard of Sukkot. That was terrific. Anyway.
It is.
On my doctoral committee, and then I met Lisa, and she had studied with Carol, and our first child, Sarah, went to school and studied with Carol. You guys came to our wedding.
That's right. And we knew, was it your parents or Lisa's parents?
Probably Lisa's parents.
Yeah. What's her maiden name?
Stockton.
Oh, right.
Her dad is a trustee at Duke. And
Right. I knew him. Yes.
Yeah. So I loved picking up your memoir, An Accidental Archaeologist, and I don't know if anybody else reading it had the reaction that I did, but I almost started drooling on some of the pages because you name people that to me, they're sort of in the pantheon of great authors that I've read. They've lined my bookshelves, and they're people that you knew. Like you had a disagreement with Abraham Heschel. You went to the home of Martin Buber. And then Ernest Wright, Aharoni, Deaver, Neusner, Netzer, Friedman. These are people that you knew and worked with. Well,
some of them contemporaries, as you know. Yeah.
It's amazing. And some people you talked about in the book I knew, like Tom Langford, Jack Sasson, W.D. Davies. Yeah. It isn't part of the delight of... I know the part of the delight in my work are the relationships that I build over time. And that's true in academics as well. You've befriended a lot of people.
I'm sure you attended SBL or some of the conventions, and you know that the highlight is seeing old friends and colleagues and catching up. And it's not necessarily in a seminar. It's usually at the bar in the lobby.
Exactly. Well, those relationships are treasured, but I have to say I was impressed. You knew people like Martin Buber. You went to his home.
Yeah, and I think in the book I tell the story of when I asked him a question that obviously was right central on his mind. He pulled me up from the back and sat me right down in front of me. He says, "Now we can talk seriously."
I hope it's a true story. I remember the one of where he was speaking to some Catholic priests, and he said, "Now the difference between us is you believe the Messiah has come, and I think he's not come yet. I propose we wait for him together." It was a good line.
Oh, that's nice.
And then he said, "When he comes, we can ask him, were you here before?" And he said, "I hope I'm close enough to whisper in his ear, for the love of God, don't answer," which is I hope that's a true story.
It sounds like a real good, true Buber story.
Yeah.
Right?
So thinking of something like I grew up, I'd never heard of Sukkot. I didn't grow up with any Jewish kids. The Jewish Christian relationship for somebody like you coming to Duke, I did not know this stuff about you. Your father came through Ellis Island. And as a kid, I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was exasperated to read. There were slurs that were hurled at you as a kid. And then your story about John Blue when you went off to college, seeing if you had
horns.
I thought, did that really happen? Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell about that.
It was one of the most disappointing and frightening evenings at Dartmouth when I found my roommate crawling aside the bed and sticking his hands in my hair looking for these bumps and vestigial horns. And I woke up and I said, "John, what in the heck are you doing?" He says, "I want to see the horns." And then, of course, he said he was taught this as a child, that all Jews had these vestigial horns because that's what he was told as a child. Mm. But I think more than that, at Dartmouth, when the swastika hung up in my dorm for Father's Weekend, and underneath it said, "Jews go home," my father grabbed me and said, "What the heck is this, Rick?" And he says, "You go pack your bags, we're leaving." I didn't leave Germany as a refugee to see something like this in America. That was the low point, of course, of my freshman year.
But you stayed at Dartmouth.
Well, we had a very enlightened dean who went on to become president of Rollins College and other colleges after Thaddeus Seymour, who, on the advice of one of my religion and philosophy professors, Patrick Scott Craig, called him up, and he went and checked to see that this awful banner was hanging up, and confirmed it. And I met with my religion professor and the dean, and he says, "I will take care of this. This gentleman, this awful student, will not be here beyond this weekend." And he was sent packing. I don't think that would have happened today. You know, there've been all sorts of lawyers involved and this and that. But in those days, I mean, the dean dealt with it swiftly and conclusively. And one of my friends in my dormitory played chess with my father to calm him down. Also, with a couple of good stiff drinks, because you know it was a traumatic event to see that.
And he threatened to kill you.
Yes, he did. And I think I mentioned in the memoir, at my graduation from Dartmouth with my aunt and uncle and sister and parents there, we were looking around, you know, is he here? You know, is there going to be attack? But nothing happened, thank God.
You know, I had the great privilege at Duke of doing my doctoral work with Roland Murphy, who I think personally did so much for Catholic-Protestant relationships. But then you came on the faculty at Duke as Jewish, and you did a lot for Protestant, Christian, Jewish relationship. Let me ask you this: you're an archaeologist, you're a Bible scholar. How does archaeology and scholarship matter for how people get along. We still have anti-Semitism. We have a spike in it in the world today. Does archaeology and scholarship help in some way if we can work on that?
I think the thing about archaeologists, which brings people of all backgrounds together, is that it filters into the discussion a level of independent witness material, evidence, that allows an even hand with everyone. You can discuss the ministry of Jesus, but when you look at what's on the ground in Jerusalem and Galilee in the first century, most of it is unmistakable and evidentiary and admissible, so to speak. And it brings people together and makes them, I think at a different level by inviting to the table, as it were, this level of material culture.
I'm sure you've tracked a place that I've begun taking people over time, since you know synagogues in the Galilee. So Magdala, years ago you couldn't visit Magdala, and now we go there, and it's such a Christianized site. You know, the Catholics kind of made it kind of a retreat center. What's your reaction to the discovery of the synagogue at Magdala?
I think the discoveries at Magdala are among the most important that we have in the whole discussion of Jesus' Galilean ministry. Unfortunately, they come under the aegis of this Catholic group, Legionnaires of Christ, which has built a Mary study center and hotel there. And the Legionnaires of Christ have supporters like Steve Bannon and a famous filmmaker who shall remain nameless, who did a film about Jesus in Aramaic. So the movement itself has come under a lot of scrutiny. Its founder has been convicted of sexual misconduct and all sorts of terrible things. And this came to light recently, and I was taking a group around in October of Duke alumni, and it came to our attention from certain people that Legionnaires of Christ was a very questionable organization to have such important data under its supervision. Nonetheless, a second synagogue was found there last December.
Yeah.
We have 2 first-century synagogues now from the time of Jesus, unmistakably dated, excavated by the Israel Antiquities Authority and the Legionnaires of Christ University in Mexico City, called ANUAC. And that's an acronym. And the material is phenomenal, including this pediment, this stone piece with a menorah on it in the middle of a synagogue, which I personally believe is the bottom element of a reader's platform where the scripture was read. And if its find spot is correct, then they're facing Jerusalem. And it's the first evidentiary piece of data that we have that people were praying towards the holy city.
It's fascinating. Father Juan Solana, the Mexican priest, he has so much charisma. We've gotten to be friends with. He's been here to Charlotte and so on. A lot of these archaeological sites, it's like that, right? There's sort of contention between universities, and it's not all purity at all. Let's shift subjects, though. I loved reading in your book about Carol, your wife Carol. She's a great scholar. Remember addressing our wedding invitation. It was Dr. and Dr. Meyers. It was great. What I did not know until I read your book, you guys got married 9 weeks after you met.
That's right.
Good grief.
And you tell
the story in the book, and I can repeat it very briefly.
Yeah.
At age 23, I was appointed Hillel director at Brandeis and Wellesley. Well, and Carol was a senior at Wellesley College, and one of my functions was to bring kosher food for Sabbath, Friday night dinner, and lead services there every other week. And that spring day, I was bringing food and leading services in her dormitory. And she had not come to the other venues, but she was on bells. She was at the switchboard, as was required by all the students. And she heard me singing the parts of the service and came in and introduced herself to me. And after that evening service, I drove her to Harvard Square and we walked around, and that was that. We were attached at the hip forever.
Yeah, in the book, you tell a pretty humorous story about when you got engaged and you thought she was weeping for joy.
Yeah, the smoke in our home, family home, everybody, was smoking 2 packs a day at least, and she could not deal with the smoke. Everyone thought she was crying for joy, but it was the darn cigarette smoke killing her.
Well, I love the way that the two of you sort of straddle the field. She has so much expertise in the Iron Age, early Israel, and you have so much expertise in Persian Greek period, and that's a great thing. So I think I also didn't realize this, that you were part of the Masada excavation. I always take people to Masada and we see what's been found there. It's absolutely amazing. That must have been just stunning to be part of that.
It was the first major volunteer dig in Israel ever. And we were both students of Yigael Yadin at the Hebrew University that year of first year of marriage. And he invited us to come to the dig, which took place in winter because in summer the temperatures are forbidding and it's much too hot. And it was very exciting. All of the staff members with whom we became friendly ultimately became the leaders for the next generation of Israeli archaeology and biblical studies. And it was absolutely memorable. The picture on the front of the book, by the way, was taken by someone who had a camera there illegally. We took the ban on cameras quite literally, and Yadin, if he saw a camera, kicked the person out and destroyed the camera and the film. He had an exclusive arrangement with the London Observer and certain TV stations, and he was the only one to allow photos out of the dig. But there's one of the illegal ones.
Well, that must have been. You stayed below Masada. Did you climb up that snake path every day to go to work?
We were on the western side, so we went up the so-called siege ramp.
Yeah,
and walked up there at sunrise, around 5 o'clock. Stayed up there till 1 o'clock. Had breakfast on the site. Wow. And a couple of times it rained and got cold, and we didn't bring sweatshirts that day, of course, and ate in a cave, ate breakfast in a cave.
Well, I want to ask you about it. You had many excavations. I want to ask you about a couple, but you do touch on in the book, and this is always important to remember, is that history was happening while excavations were going on. So 1967, there was a war, 73. And you report in the book that in 1997, you were 1 block away from a suicide bombing. It's just that tension. It's just heartbreaking, and one of the things we just had to live with, those of us who visit Israel.
Yes, that was a frightful moment. We felt the ground shake beneath our feet. We knew at once what had happened. We ran back to the hotel, put on the TV, and when I think 27 people killed, and we just wept, and it's just horrific event.
Goodness.
And it went on for so long, and my family was not always happy that we were going, let alone taking all these students. But we were always in touch with the embassy, with the police. We knew our way around so well. We felt we could manage, and we did. Thank goodness. But those were awful years, and the several intifadas have really killed the prospects for peace. They killed the peace movement in Israel. Too many suicide missions, and that has brought us to the place where we are at present. Absolute stalemate and a right-wing government in Israel that is not particularly friendly or cooperative with the Arab world, especially the Palestinians.
Yeah, goodness gracious.
Yes.
So in the summer of 1981, I hadn't finished my dissertation, but I was getting ready to go be a pastor. But I taught in the summer at UNC Greensboro. I taught a course on the prophets in that department. And a friend and I went to the movie theater, and we saw Raiders of the Lost Ark. Everybody else did that in the summer of 81. What was pretty remarkable is, serious scholarship largely goes unnoticed by the public, but in that season, 80, 81, you and Carol were digging at a place called Nabratain, and you found something that was amazing, and you landed in People magazine. Tell our folks about that. It's just incredible to me.
Yeah, the coincidence of the first Indiana Jones movie, which we hadn't even heard of because we were working in the field. And what we found was the pediment of a Torah shrine with rampant lions on it and a place for the eternal light to hang in the middle of it. And it's also called the Ark in Jewish practice, but it's called a Torah shrine in a more technical way. And as was customary for us, I wrote a press release after the end of the season, handed it over to the Duke Bureau of Communications, and we were heading out on a vacation to Long Island with friends, and late afternoon, we were leaving Sunday morning, and late afternoon, the head of Duke publicity calls us up and says, I've read your press release. It's really nice. And he says, you have to go to the movies. I said, what are you talking about? He says, have you seen Indiana Jones movie? I said, no, we've vaguely heard about it. He says, you go to the movies and then you can go on your trip. He says, but go right away. So we stopped everything. We either went at 5 or 7 o'clock before we even finished packing for our trip the next day. And we saw the movie and we said, oh my goodness, I think I know what he's thinking. So he sent out the press release, and Sunday afternoon and Monday, we're getting calls from all news services, People magazine, all the TV stations in New York to appear. And it was just crazy, Real life archaeologists find lost Ark of the Covenant in Desert of Galilee, which is the most tree-lined place in all the Middle East.
And I love I remember seeing a photo they took. It must have been around Duke Chapel somewhere, looking in the background.
Yeah,
the two of you dressed up, looking like Indiana and Marion. Yes,
the People magazine moved down to Durham and took all these pictures, and we had a lot of fun with it.
And I think in the book you said you were on Good Morning America with David Hartman.
Yeah, Duke graduate, Duke alum. We were invited on all the networks, and everyone wanted an exclusive. So we picked, I think it was ABC, it was Good Morning America. And David Hartman was a Duke graduate, had a child at Duke. So we said, we'll go with him.
I used to say, I've preached at Duke Chapel a bunch of times, and I used to see David in the congregation. Like, oh, wow, famous guy out there.
Yeah.
That's a view of archaeology, by the way, that it's sort of a trophy hunting, and real archaeology is not like that.
Correct. Real archaeology is really putting all the nuts and bolts together, pottery, coins, small finds, artifacts, looking at a room and plotting where everything was found and trying to figure out what the people were doing and how life was lived 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago. It's called household archaeology. And that's really where the field is today. And actually, Carol and I are, with other people, are editing a new reference work on household archaeology as it informs ancient biblical culture and early Christianity.
Carol's written a lot on, women in the Iron Age, Israelite world, and what was their daily life. It's fascinating, way more fascinating to me than finding a trophy.
Yeah.
One of my wife Lisa's bucket list things is to be part of a dig. She hopes to get that done one of these. UNC Charlotte has a dig on Mount Zion. I don't know if you followed that at all. It's pretty.
No, cool. James Tabor and I are actually. I've been in touch with him today and yesterday on a couple of notes. And Shimon Gibson.
Yeah.
James retired several years ago, but Shimon Gibson is the man now at UNCC.
I see him. I've taken groups to the site in Israel, in Jerusalem, and Shimon's led us around, and he's so charming and handsome, and he's got a story for everything. He's absolutely wonderful. The other cool dig where I like to take people to when I'm in Israel is Sepphoris.
Yeah,
and that's absolutely remarkable. And that was another noteworthy find. I'll let you tell about it. You found this Mona Lisa of Galilee. That's so cool. And not only did you find it, you preserved it pretty miraculously. Tell our folks about that. That's a great story.
Well, the selection of Sepphoris as a major archaeological site and project came after a decade and a half excavating small villages in the Upper Galilee. Sepphoris being the heart of the Lower Galilee and one of two urban centers, Tiberias and Sepphoris, in the Lower Galilee. We had our eyes on that for many, many years. And in 1987, we hit this absolutely gorgeous floor with the mosaic with all the legends in Greek. And it happened to be dated unmistakably to around 200 of the Common Era, early mosaic with Greek legends, to the time when at Sepphoris, Rabbi Judah the Prince was there editing and promulgating the Mishnah and other early rabbinic writings. But one of the things that happened was a lot of people thought the mosaic was from the time of Jesus. And so many people in the New Testament field hailed this discovery as proving that the Galilee was totally Hellenized and cosmopolitan in the time of Jesus, even though in truth it was 200 years later.
Yeah.
Thereupon ensued a very spirited debate in scholarship about when the Galilee was Hellenized and to what degree Greek philosophy and other ideas of Greek thought could have penetrated into Jesus' early life in Nazareth and in the small villages of Galilee. And so that became a major cause célèbre in New Testament studies. And I and many of my staff members got involved, and we're still involved in it and in this discussion. And I think it's been resolved in favor of a more nuanced view of the Hellenization of Galilee, which really occurred in the 2nd century after the Second War with Rome, and then on forward. But this accommodation to Greco-Roman culture, which began really in the Persian period, was a process not to be denied and went on and actually made both Judaism and Christianity more accessible to the westernized world, because Greek philosophy, Greek language, Greek culture had enveloped that part of the world, and it's still upon us. And it's one of the things that really separates us from other segments of the globe.
So tell folks about the Mona Lisa and how you preserved it. That's, to me, just amazing.
Fortunately, in those days, the Antiquities Authority was very pushy, and they put the onus of preservation on the dig. Today, there's so much activity that most digs could not accommodate that request or demand. And we found a donor family at Duke, the Gottesman family, one of the daughters of whom was working for us, very wealthy family. They donated the money to preserve the mosaic in the best possible way. And after consulting with Israel Museum Conservation Department and the Department of Conservation of the Cypriot government, believe it or not, they said the best way to preserve this for posterity would be to lift it, strengthen it from underneath, roll it, and then put it on movable pods and reunite them after that process was completed. It cost a ton of money. It cost about $250,000 then, which is about almost $700,000 in today's money. And we did it, and it was displayed at the Israel Museum for 3 years as part of the deal, and a building was built to house it at the site, and it's in perfect condition to this day. All the other mosaics at Sepphoris, which were not done in this proper way, are all crumbling because of groundwater seeping up underneath the mosaic and crumbling the individual stone tiles called tesserae.
Wow. It's a mess. I've seen all that down the hill. Goodness gracious! But you had to be scared when you rolled that thing up that you might ruin it.
We held our breath for sure, and until we got a call that they arrived safely at the museum in Jerusalem, we were pretty nervous.
If we had more time, I'd love to talk some about music. You and I have in common that we took piano lessons as kids and became singers, although you're a better singer than I ever dreamed of being. I love the story about, though, Ben Smith. I remember Ben Smith asking you to be a cantor there at Duke Chapel and how important that was. Tell that real quickly. That's a good.
That's one of my favorite stories, and Ben was a very special guy.
Oh.
And I have been in the opera workshop and doing annual recitals at Duke for many years already. And Ben was one of my fans, invited me to sing the Ernst Bloch Sacred Service, which is the greatest choral work in Jewish music. And we did it with 30, 40 members of the North Carolina Symphony and the whole chapel choir, which is pushing 100 people. Practiced like crazy for half a year. I sang bits and pieces of it on and off. What was most exciting was Ben, we were doing this in Hebrew, of course, it's written in Hebrew, and Ben took me before the performance on a Sunday afternoon, which was filled to standing room only, which was over 1,800 people. And we walked out to the front steps, and Ben says, "Today, Duke Chapel is not open and welcoming to the Jewish community, but to people of all colors and all faiths." And we both hugged each other and started to cry.
Wow.
Because he said that the chapel was a little too white for his own taste and not welcoming enough to people of different forms of Christian worship, especially people of color. And we got through the performance, and it was beautiful, and strong applause and all of that. And a couple of weeks later, Ben was diagnosed with AIDS, had to come out. He had never come out to his parents, only to his closest friends. And he was dead in 6 months, but he asked me to be an usher at his funeral.
Wow.
And he played the last movement, which was the mourner's Kaddish, the mourner's blessing. He played that at his funeral, and I was singing.
Oh, my goodness.
On the recording. So that was one of the most emotional things that ever happened to me at Duke University, and it was in the chapel.
Are you still singing? Your voice sounds good.
Yes, I'm still a cantor at Bethel in Durham and sing in several choirs, have traveled extensively overseas with Rodney's international choir, Rodney Weinkoop.
Yeah.
And yes, have a very active musical life even today.
So last question. Of course, I wonder what you're working on now, but let me bend that a little bit. What hasn't been discovered in Israel that you hope will be? What hasn't been uncovered? What else? I keep being amazed every time I go. There's something new that I've not seen before. What haven't we found or uncovered yet?
That's kind of an impossible question. I mean, real archaeology and real archaeologists are not looking for something specific. They target a area, they target a series of questions that they'd like resolved. And Carol and I are pretty much focused on household archaeology. We feel that with new methodologies in computer science and recording, we can get a better hold on everyday life with greater attention to the more modest items that one finds on a dig that often get overlooked. Food stuffs, and Carol has co-edited a dictionary of foodstuffs in the Bible, just came out at Bloomsbury earlier this year. Spindle whorls, more attention to where they're found and, what sort of jobs and roles were played by men and women and children in the early biblical period, the Old Testament period, and in the later New Testament and early Judaic period. So various sites will produce various finds that can enlighten boldly and surprising ways, but we don't know in advance where they are.
Yeah.
I would say the Israelis are going about your question in bold ways, but they're always looking to settle political or historical political issues. So was there a real David? Was there a united monarchy? Was Israel Finkelstein right about lowering the chronology 110 years and cutting off the realia from the kingship of David? And they're right in the middle of this fight's been going on for 40 years now. And, I think the minimalists have certainly lost. It's not clear that the maximalists have won, but I think a higher chronology has certainly been established beyond shadow of a doubt. And I think the Israelis, biblical archaeologists, are still focused on that, while a lot of us other guys are looking at, more sophisticated and minute forms of improving the discipline and getting at significant answers through new methodologies.
Eric, this has been just fascinating. Our folks are going to be and people all over the place listening to this podcast, and not just in my church. They're going to learn a lot from this and be enriched by it. So thank you so much for taking the time and for being a friend over so many years. I'm really grateful. Thank you for putting this book out. I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Nice to reestablish contact. Please, warmest greetings to your family.
We'll if I get up and spend some more time in Durham, we'll get together sometime.
Okay, good.
All
We
right.
still have basketball tickets and we go to the games.
Yeah, I'm going to a couple this year. I'll look for you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Eric.
Bye.